Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the AUHF and distinguished attendees, I'm delighted to welcome you to an extraordinary online event today. My name is Samuel Akinin. I'm a board member of the African Union for Housing Finance and the founder and CEO at Fundroof. Fundroof is Africa's mortgage game changer. So we're connecting home buyers, lenders, and developers in one integrated housing platform. And our mission is to extend the democratized access to finance for the millions of home buyers in Africa while empowering lenders and developers with leads and conversion tools. So today is my privilege to host this remarkable session sponsored by the AUHF, dedicated to exploring the transformative power of Proptech in the housing industry. So at the AUHF, we're committed to promoting the development of effective housing finance markets and the delivery of affordable housing across Africa. I invite each and every one of you to consider becoming a member of this esteemed organization that is working together to shape the future of housing finance on the continent. And as the chair of the Membership Services Committee, I assure you that the AUHF membership provides an unparalleled access to industry expertise, networking opportunities, and collaborative initiatives that drive positive change. I also welcome our audience to join us in attending and participating at this year's AUHF annual conference. It will take place in Namibia from October 31st to November 2nd, and it will be an incredible platform to showcase your contributions to the housing industry and network around the topic of affordable housing on the front lines, case studies from the continent. So today we have the immense pleasure of presenting a thought-provoking Proptech Master Class by the distinguished Dr. Roland Igbinova. Dr. Roland brings with him 21 years of experience in financial services, real estate, and Proptech. His presentation will shed light on the crucial role of technology, the impact of Proptech on the housing industry, and the significance of capacity building and thought leadership. Get ready to be enlightened and inspired as we explore the impact of Proptech innovations across Africa and the world. Following Dr. Igbinova's enlightening session, we will dive into a dynamic panel discussion on Proptech adoption across the continent. Our esteemed moderator, Dr. Roland, will be joined by two passionate Proptech founders. We have John Omen on the line. He's the co-founder and CEO of LiveBent by Construct, a company dedicated to transforming Nigeria's construction industry using innovative technology and data-driven solutions with a background in real estate and construction. John is passionate about promoting transparency and eliminating inefficiencies in the housing industry. And myself, co-founder and CEO of Fundroof. I've already introduced myself. Together, we'll share the opportunities and challenges of embracing Proptech innovations in Africa and sharing valuable insights on how we can shape the housing value chain. Before we begin, let me introduce our main guest, Dr. Roland Igbinova. With extensive background in financial services and real estate, Dr. Igbinova was appointed by His Excellency Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo as the team lead for the real estate and construction sector under the Job Creation Unit of the Office of the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. As the president of the Nigeria Proptech Association, Dr. Roland spearheads the development and organization of the Proptech industry in Nigeria, advocating for an enabling environment and investment climate for Proptech companies. His expertise, coupled with academic achievements from the School of Management of Cranfield University in the UK and the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, make him a true industry leader and an invaluable resource for our session today. Get ready for an engaging and enlightening experience. Welcome to the AUHF Proptech Master Class. Without further ado, Dr. Roland Igbinova.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much. It's interesting, very, very interesting. Okay, so we're going to, over the next, let's say 45, 15 minutes, I'm going to just be delving into what's happening with the Proptech space in Africa, maybe global, and then probably looking at what's happening in Africa, and then we'll then take some questions and answers. So if you have questions, please, as I make the presentation, you can put the questions in the chat room and I'll deal with them because I want this to be as engaging and as interactive as can be. Once, just like Sam has said, once we've gone through the 45, 50 minutes of my presentation and we've taken questions, then we'll then come into discussing, innovation and adoption of PropTech in Africa. Because one thing that is happening within the space and the experience that we're getting with the market in the region right now is that there's some level of pushback in terms of adoption. And so we want to discuss this with two founders that I know that are really diving deep into PropTech in Africa. Interestingly, Sam won the pitch at the World Bank just a few days or a few weeks ago, where we had several companies pitching their product, so which is a good thing. And so there's a lot of word of experience that Sam will be bringing in for us. And also John is doing some revolutionary work in terms of helping the construction market in Africa, but starting right now with Nigeria. So that's what we're looking at throughout this masterclass. Please feel free at any point to ask questions and stop me if there are things that you want to clarify. So I'll go over and share my presentation for today. Sam, if you can just confirm that I'm good, that everyone can see my screen, then I'll just head out. Yeah.
We can see your screen.
Perfect. Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So basically, PropTech 54 is, I'm just going to be background on PropTech 54. PropTech and then 54 meaning Africa, 54 countries in Africa. PropTech 54 is basically helping and curating PropTech within the continent, where we have an accelerator program that also comes in with some pre-seed investments. So basically what we're doing is helping a lot of early stage startups, very early stage, idea stage startup, help them get to MVP stage. And so we have a 16 weeks program, usually that starts from September to January of every year. So that's basically what Prop 54 is all about. Again, it's all about pushing the innovation with PropTech in the continent. And so if you're an early stage PropTech founder and just trying to work around your product market fit on your minimum viable product, you're in the right place, and you can talk to us to help you take your PropTech journey forward. I always like to start with this slide, and the reason is because we've seen what has happened with PropTech. We've seen what has happened with fintech, and PropTech, as we see it, is taking that path. So Wallman, in his article talking about new paradigm, was very strong on inflection points. And this didn't make sense to a lot of people when you talk about an inflection point until COVID struck. And so with COVID striking in late 2019 and then early 2020, when it became, when the region was really understanding what we are really into, it became very important for people to look at, yes, we know technology. I mean, before we didn't just start knowing technology or using technology because of COVID, but working from home. And today we're still reading articles, loads and loads of articles where people are not willing to return to work, especially when you talk about the generation, when you talk about millennials, really, and then talk about a lot of people who are in the tech ecosystem. A lot of people don't want to return to work. And really, that begins to make everybody think around what has happened, what has COVID brought. Yes, there's still a few people who's gone back to work, but COVID brought about a really strong strategic inflection point. And there's no better industry than the real estate industry to kind of explain what a strategic inflection point is. And if you look at this work, this graphical illustration by Wallman, you see that people who do not give any recognition when there is an inflection point tend to reject change and maintain the status quo. But what happens? Their business never thrives, even in their personal lives. If you don't realize that there's an inflection point where you need to accept new changes and adjust your methods to make those changes bring about the requisite or desired goals that you want, then what happens is that you're going down. And that's basically what has happened within the real estate industry. Now, real estate is a very difficult asset class. I say that because it's entirely different from when you're buying or trading in any other commodities. The commodities are kind of different. You know, commodities will probably take around a maximum of say 6 to 9 months, for example. But you are dealing with an asset class that is long-term in nature. Okay, so a typical closeout for a real estate transaction from buying and up to when you dispose of that asset, maybe after living in the asset, it could take as long as, for example, let's take the example for a mortgage. Okay, a mortgage could take as long as 15, 20 years. In some clients, even up to 25, 30 years. So you can imagine the extent to which that asset class, real estate, the extent to which it spans. And so within a 20, 25-year period, that asset class can take any form or shape. It goes through different cycles of financial crisis. So it's entirely different when you are trying to bring in technology or they are trying to bring in something new into such an asset class that is long tenured. And that is why Proptech has really, for lack of a better word, rejected or stayed in the paradigm of having to change, because you are dealing with an asset class that is long-term in nature. You are dealing with an asset class that requires long-term financing. And so it becomes difficult because you are not able to predict the long-term nature of that asset. But you cannot, because of that, begin to live in a dissonance gap. And this is explained between the difference, the gap that exists between going up on the new paradigm or rejecting change in the status quo. Because once you're in that dissonance gap, what happens is you're not, the creativity and innovation doesn't happen. I've taken time to explain the strategic inflection point, because the overall goal of the crusade or for the masterclass is to have early adopters into the PropTech space. The fintech guys have done this very, very well. And today we see fintech unicorns in Africa. All right. And so that's why it is very important that even as you discuss your products and new ideas with traditional real estate players and professionals, you need to be able to let them know that the trajectory for this asset class, it's PropTech. And so I'm going to also be sharing with us, you know, what I mean by PropTech. I know that there's been a lot of conversation on what is PropTech or what is in PropTech, but clearly the intersection of real estate and technology is what's PropTech. And I'm using this slide from the Center for Affordable Housing Finance to just explain PropTech. They've done this work many years ago, but it's looking at the value chain for PropTech and really letting us know what PropTech is. Sorry, my slide is freezing. If you just give me, or is it changing from your side? Sam, help me confirm. I'm moving the slides, but it's not changing from here.
We're still on the inflection point slide from my side.
Okay, so that's what's still happening. So you just give me a minute. I don't know why this is freezing. You know, to just try and reshare the slide. So basically, give me a minute. Right, the slide has moved. Did my slide get to move? I just need a confirmation.
Yes, we're on the cover page.
Okay, great. Okay, so basically, it's about reimagining real estate, you know, and I'm saying that across reimagining real estate, I'll come back to this first, but I just want to run through and show this slide. It probably should have come up earlier, but so if you see this slide, like I said, this is work done by the Center for Affordable Housing Finance a while ago, but it's been my best, and maybe David, maybe we need to improve on this value chain, you know, and make it maybe a bit more detailed, you know, and all of that. But this has been my simplest way of explaining PropTech. That at every intersection, whether you're talking about access to land, okay, you're talking about planning and building regulations, you're talking about infrastructure services, construction and building material sector, construction finance, end user finance, and operations and maintenance, which also involves rental property. Across each of those points in this value chain, technology has a role. And simply, that is the definition of PropTech, the intersection of property and technology. Very good thing that our panelists rather will be having conversations around this. For example, Sam is working at the end user finance, where he's brought in technology for re-engineering the entire mortgage process, okay? And he's doing that, in the whole of East Africa. John is in the construction and building material sector, where he's brought in Construct to help with all of the activities and the processes and bringing efficiency in construction and building material sectors. And I'm sure a lot of our participants here will look at this value chain and begin to clarify or maybe recognize where they're playing in this market. Your ability to come up with a product increasing user experience, efficiency, saving costs for the customer begins to, clarify what you're doing or what the PropTech industry is doing. So as a matter of fact, bringing technology into this entire value chain is what we are all doing within the PropTech industry. So I wanted to use this to just lay the background in terms of, so that when I keep saying PropTech, for those who are probably new to PropTech or who want to understand what PropTech is, this is the basis. I'll just reiterate before I leave this slide, is to say that for every point of this real estate value chain, we might have missed out maybe one or two of the points in the value chain, but what we're saying is that for every step of the way, you can introduce technology to solve this problem. So for example, planning and building regulations, right? The Lagos State government in Nigeria created a Lagos State Real Estate and Regulatory Authority, which is a building regulation platform, LASRIRA. Okay, so across the value chain, so whether government, whether private sector, what we're saying is that along the value chain for real estate and property, we can actually introduce technology. And that's what's basically what we mean when we talk about PropTech. And so across the continent, it will interest you to know, this map was initially created by Jim Desley from UNISO, but we have had to upgrade, we have updated the map with number of startups across the continent. So if you look at this mapping, you will realize that you're seeing a lot of activities out of Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, Morocco, Rwanda, and even Ghana. The first time that this map was done, Ghana probably had around 2 PropTech startups. When this map was done in 2019, had about 2 startups. Nigeria was just then around 80 startups. I think South Africa was around 55. So you will see that within a 4-year period, you've seen the growth of tech startups within the continent. I'm sure that there are a few more that we haven't captured, but it just tells you in terms of the numbers of interest and in terms of numbers of people understanding that there is a need to begin to bring technology to this very difficult asset class. And so this really, really enlightens and is something that is interesting, that helps us look at the fact that PropTech is beginning to gain ground in the region. And just showing this map also puts the question, in the forefront to say, how are traditional real estate players looking at a lot of these young tech startups? Hopefully, these are some of the things that we will deal with as we go along. And so I've explained, I've used the housing value chain to explain what property technology is, but it's also just important to look at this image source from Google, looking at where PropTech sits, looking about really the intersection for PropTech and FinTech. Because again, when you begin to introduce payments into PropTech, it almost looks like you are moving away from PropTech. But thank God we have a lot of embedded financing. And so it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still PropTech. But what is important to note is that PropTech is not playing on its own. There are a lot of embedded payments and financing structures that can be put in PropTech. So for example, you have a lot of platforms where you can do transactions. Okay, there are crowdfunding platforms right now. There are fractional investments in real estate where you can own pieces of those investments, and all of that are done on the PropTech platform. So you take, for example, a company like Cable out of Nigeria who is doing fractional real estate investment, where on the same platform where they show you properties across the world, not just in Nigeria, not just in Africa, where you are able to own with about $10, $20, you're able to own a fraction of that property. What they have done is to bring in the FinTech onto the platform so that you are not just only seeing the property, you can actually make your payment and your transactions on that platform. And so that's the intersection for PropTech and FinTech. And we see the same for smart real estate, where you have the Internet of Things, where you have gated communities being managed by PropTech startups who have developed solutions for security, KYCs, just to get access into gated communities. And basically, the best way to really look at this also is to think of the collaborative and shared economy. So for example, today, there are companies like Hap Living who are doing a lot of co-living models. What does that really mean? So for example, you want to take an apartment and you don't have the money to pay for a room in an apartment. Hap Living can actually match you with people who you will stay with, and then you will share the cost. What are they doing with this? Easing affordability, reducing costs. So again, if you look at the entire technology, whether you're looking at FinTech, you're looking at the sharing economy, PropTech has a big role to play. A very notable startup in Africa that we all know is Split. Split has helped in ensuring that people can pay their rent on a monthly basis. So this is really what PropTech is all about, is bringing technology into that process. So for example, a landlord because the landlord doesn't know you, he doesn't want to collect monthly payment from you. And this is very peculiar to a few countries. I might be saying monthly payments now, and someone out of South Africa is wondering, is that a big deal? Yes, in Nigeria, you will pay, in Nigeria and a few countries, I think even in Ghana, you pay like 2 years rent upfront. So technology has made it possible for people to now pay on a monthly basis. And so this is the role that property technology is actually playing within the continent. And what are the drivers really? Why is this happening? And this was some work done by Northcote, I think in 2019, where they were looking at the drivers for the entire real estate industry and the PropTech industry. Of course, we know that mobile penetration is very huge across the continent, right? And so because of the rising mobile phone use, it is now very easy for technology products to thrive. And I showed you the map. There are lots and lots of ideas coming within the PropTech space. A lot of people are developing products, designing product within that asset class that can help us in any part of that value chain that I just showed earlier on. And of course, no asset class has big data, as much as real estate does. Imagine a listing company, property listing company who's been on, or an agent. Let me not even go to the property listing company. Imagine a traditional real estate agent who's been on for over 25, 30 years. You can imagine the repository of data that real estate agent would have. They would have house prices, they would have the different scenarios in market, in the macroeconomics, and how that is affecting the prices of houses, whether it is sales or whether it is for rent. So there's huge big data involved in that asset class. And remember, because of the long nature of real estate, it means that you can actually monitor a property or have data in a property for a single property for up to 20 years. And you can actually characterize that property in terms of how that property has behaved over that period. And so all of this is enabling artificial intelligence and machine learning when it comes to real estate asset class. And I hope we have time to talk a bit more about artificial intelligence and machine learning and predictive analytics in the PropTech space. Customer experience is a very big driver. Today, now, if you took an average within the continent, if you took an average of homeowners, or maybe you took a median age, let me not say average, you'd probably be looking at somewhere around a range between 45 to 50, right? What does that mean? It means that a lot of the millennials will probably not be owning their houses, but the way they want to own their houses is entirely different. And from some of the work that people like Split, Hap Living, Cable that they're doing, we are finding that a lot of people want to do co-living. A lot of people want to have this sharing economy. You know, Uber is a very easy way to bring in the sharing economy when you're talking about customer experience. And so if you know Uber, what we're saying is that, you know, you don't have to own an asset to be a real estate asset to be comfortable. And there are a lot of people, a lot of young, upwardly mobile people who are keen into that kind of sub-asset class in real estate, where you don't want to own the entire property. You just want to be able to have a part of that property, live in it, you know, experience the use of that property without any hindrance. And so customer experience is redefining and reimagining the real estate market space. And whether you like it or not, those who are young today, what will happen? They will certainly continue to adopt the technology, grow into that technology. And so when they come into that median age of 45 or 47 that we're talking about, they are not going to change the ways of how they have learned or how they have enjoyed customer experience. So the point that I'm making is that right now, if you talk about young millennials, you talk about people who are on their phone, who don't even want to type their full name before it comes up on the phone, because there's no patience to type Roland. You know, I want to type RO and then Roland shows, and then I just swipe it, and then I'm in my name. In fact, once I swipe Roland, all the other details, my address, my last name, my email should automatically come up. That's the kind of generation that we have right now. And so this means that consumer demographics are changing. The way consumers want to use the products are changing. And this is a huge driver for PropTech. And also, again, the emergence of new technologies is another driver. So you are looking at the Internet of Things. I want to be able to put my AC on before I get home. I want to set the temperature right. I want to put on my music when I'm still 30 miles away from home, just to make sure that the ambience is nice when I get to the house. There are a lot of new technologies, hard and soft technologies that is driving PropTech that is driving PropTech within the continent. So when you hear PropTech, anything technology that relates to this asset class of real estate that we're talking about is basically what we are saying. And this is my slide. I came here, I discussed this earlier, you know, just trying to paint that picture of PropTech. So I think I'll just stop and check the chat room if there are questions to take before I continue. So like I mentioned, if there are questions, let me know, and we will take those questions as we are going along, just to make this interactive as much as possible. Okay, great. So as I was saying, that in terms of the drivers, for technology, that we are at the point where the consumer behaviors really, in terms of the kind of people, and that's what I was talking about, you know, the consumer behavior is really, really It's changing. It's people and it is important to dwell around the fact that consumers' behaviors are changing. Because, like I explained, whoever is 20, 25 today, who's already using a Proptech product, is going to continue on that trajectory. So, and this is my advice to even traditional real estate players, that those who are the median or average age of purchase right now are going to grow out of that target market. And if you do not change your business model, to have this intersection of technology, those who know technology now, those who are already using technology to do everything they do, are going to be the same people who get into their median age. So if you cannot adopt or develop your product, and that's where the strategic inflection point where I started this presentation off becomes very, very important. Because the truth is, things are not going to remain the way they are. And so it's important to know that, behaviors are changing and people want the ease to use or to get served in a way that they are very, very happy. And the truth with customer experience is that if a customer is using, and this becomes very important for both the tech startups, which is the Proptech startups, and also traditional real estate players. Let me take, for example, I was traveling to Kenya on an economy seat flight, and so I get on the plane, and maybe I was flying Kenya Airways, and the experience from checking in at the counter to, mind you, I'm saying economy because I'm not talking about business or premium class, so that you don't think that it's because you are a premium flyer that you are being served this way. But I'm flying economy, and right from check-in, I had maybe a 2 or 3 kg XX on the bag, and then the guy at the counter said, "No, don't worry about it. I'll take it. It's not a lot." Okay, without giving you any stress, get on the flight. You get the right menu. You're able to watch the right movies. You land in Kenya. The baggage claim and all of that is nice. Immigration talks to you nicely, and then you get to an Uber driver who picks you up from the airport. And this guy is also very nice. He helps you with your luggage. You get on the car. He asks you, how was your journey? And then he doesn't interrupt you. He doesn't disturb you from the rest of the period. Drives you safely to your hotel. Gets out of the car. Open the trunk. Puts your bags out. Make sure that the guys, the waiters or the concierge helps you with your luggage into the hotel, and you get to the front desk person, and you're standing there for 10, 15 minutes, nobody's talking to you. What has happened, right? You've had experience right from when you flew the airline up onto the Uber driver, and now you're in front of the desk or the reception in a hotel, where you are trying to understand why is this person, why you're standing there for 10 minutes, and nobody's talking to you. Now, emotionally, right, your judgment of what is happening at the front desk right now is not just based on the fact that you have spent 10 minutes waiting and nobody's attending to you, because really, you can really see that there is a lot of queue or some level of chaos in trying to attend to hotel guests. But what's really happening is that the experiences that you've had flying the airline onto the Uber guy is the yardstick for your measuring the experience that you are now receiving at the hotel. So my point is, whatever you sell or whatever you are building or whatever you are that you are developing as a tech startup, is really the experience that you are giving to your consumers, is really their judgment of the service that they are getting from you is actually based on the last service, on the last excellent service that they received. So whether you are being served, dinner or lunch in a restaurant nicely, is dependent, your judgment of that is dependent on how you have transported yourself. It may not even be a recent experience. It could be an experience that happened 2 weeks ago. But your judgment of a service is based on your last best experience. And there are a lot of articles and research on this. And so what that means is that as a tech startup, when I want to give you a service, I may have a very fantastic product, but the process of delivering that service really, really matters. And that's where user experience comes. And that's why I'm saying that whether for traditional real estate players who needs to begin to adopt Proptech, or for the tech founder, or for the Proptech tech founder, the consumer experience that you dish out helps in how fast the growth curve for your product is. And I cannot explain this enough, because this is a critical driver to what's happening in the Proptech space. Next slide, David. Sorry for the additional work that I've given you, David. So quickly, because of time, we have just about 13 minutes more. I'll jump into some of the proponents that we need to discuss in terms of what's happening within the Proptech, with the kind of technologies that are also impacting Proptech. And so we all have heard about artificial intelligence. We all found out a few months ago that you could write a thesis, by asking open AI source, and what GPT is doing, and all of Google and Microsoft right now. Okay, so I won't bore you with too much of the details in artificial intelligence, but what is important to note is that, like I said before, the asset class that we are dealing with is long-term in nature and has the ability for huge data sources. And with huge data sources on the back of real estate, predictive analytics becomes very, very easy, right? So if virtual reality and augmented reality becomes something that is very easy, and we have seen artificial intelligence in real estate, and the examples of that are in predictive analytics. So if I've searched for a 3-bedroom apartment somewhere in the bustling area in Nairobi, when next I'm around that place, what will happen is that my phone or my device or whichever gadget that I'm using pops up a 3-bedroom apartment, that is close to me within that location. And this is all based off algorithms and predictive analytics. In fact, in terms of where there is virtual reality possible and augmented reality possible, I can even as much as schedule an inspection or see that property. And that's what's happening with artificial intelligence. I think today, artificial intelligence is easier to explain when you just talk about Chat GPT and what it's doing in terms of answering all manner of questions when it comes to information and knowledge sharing. And so whether you talk about twin buildings, designing of twin buildings, 3D modeling, smart home devices, I mentioned a bit about this in terms of Internet of Things, or you're talking about property management, artificial intelligence is playing a huge role. And this is because of the data that it is gathering in terms of, so for example, in property management, you can know how much of carbon emissions that is coming off from a property. How do you reduce that amount of carbon emissions? There are devices that you can put in if you're in Nigeria, for example, in managing your diesel or gas that you use in running a building. So there's a lot of Internet of Things matched up with the analytics of artificial intelligence that is helping that value chain and bringing solutions to that value chain. So when you're talking about carbon footprint, or you are trying to manage costs in a property, Proptech comes into that place. Remember where I started off from in terms of that housing value chain. Anywhere you are able to bring in technology, it helps. And artificial intelligence is helping with that. Even when it comes to mortgages, right? In terms of underwriting, in terms of avoiding fraud, because you have a huge data of the kind of profile of people. So let's take, for example, you take a mortgage asset, you take a mortgage portfolio that has over 10,000 outstanding mortgages. And so, you can actually check within that 10,000. So if one or two people have committed fraud in terms of their KYC requirements, or they are not paying, you can actually get into that pool of outstanding mortgages. And with machine learning and all of the artificial intelligence, you can begin to profile who these kind of people are. So let's take, for example, the average age of the 3 or 4 people who've done this kind of KYC fraud are like 30, and maybe they are males, and maybe they are from a certain race, or they are from a certain professional background, right? Having all of those metrics then help you to understand what could be possible in terms of avoiding fraud. How many more of this kind of people in this mortgage portfolio should you be looking out for? Also, in terms of loan default. So you are looking at, for example, you look at your outstanding mortgages, and a lot of traditional real estate players and even mortgage institutions have not even delved into this at all. Every time I have strategy sessions with them, I keep telling them you have huge data, and with case studies and examples, I try to show them what is exactly happening. So out of this, again, these hypothetical 10,000 outstanding mortgages, you've seen that 2% of that portfolio, okay, it's hardcore, meaning they haven't paid their mortgages for the last 6 months. It's easy to then profile for new people who are going to come in. So for example, are these people who are teachers? So these 2% that are defaulting, are they teachers? Or are they lawyers? Or are they nurses? Okay, if they are nurses, how many years have they been in the nursing profession? So a lot of these data points can help you forgive me, I'm not trying to stereotype anyone, but I'm just using an example of how artificial intelligence and it's working in real estate, particularly in mortgages. So the next time a teacher or a lawyer walks in through the door and is trying to take a mortgage, you can actually profile this person to see whether that person matches the current default that you have in your system. And if it does, that's already a flag for you. Okay, I thought this is what it's happening when you get on other clients where the mortgage market is developed, and artificial intelligence is helping in this way. David, next slide. I'll try and wrap up now. I know I have just 6 minutes. And so, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, what are we really looking at? And we have a panel session with John and Sam, dedicated to looking at over the next for 30 minutes or so, looking at what do we do to push for the adoption of Proptech. So as a tech founder, as a Proptech founder, or as a traditional real estate player, what role should you be playing? What is necessary for you to do? How can Proptech help your business? How can it redefine the trajectory of the business that you are doing? How can it help with the consumer experience or customer experience that people are having? And so what you really find in an adoption process is that you have the innovators, and I say that a lot of us who have taken time to even be in this session think of innovation that way. But we need early adopters, people who will come on, use the product, and spread the good use of that product. Also bring you back reviews in terms of whether the product should be working well or not. And then you have the early majority, you have the, of course, you have the laggards at the tail end of that value chain. But you are not going to be focusing on the laggard. And Vicky did a very good job. You know, I'll recommend everyone to look at that article, T Vicky, on looking at adoption, you know. And so it becomes very important for us to help in pushing the adoption of PropTech within the continent. And so this is what I like, just the next slide. So I wanted to just to share in this master class, you know, to then look at the kind of interest that we are having within the PropTech space. Increasingly, there's a focused accelerator, MetaProp. You have the Techstars with all their different locations. Recently, last year, I think the very first cohort of Techstars in Lagos happened, and I think they are calling for, they have an opening right now calling for people to apply. That's the Techstars ARM Labs. So there are a lot of interest within the PropTech space, and I'm sharing this just so that we know that there's a lot of traction being gained from global PropTech venture capital and accelerator programs within the PropTech space. And so you're in the right track if you're a PropTech founder, or if you are just in this session trying to understand what PropTech is. You're on the right track, really. And I'm hoping that this will continue to have conversations around PropTech and how we can help you on that part. Next slide, David, as I wrap up. And so I think that's my final slide. And I think I'm right on time with just about 2 minutes left on the hour. So if there are questions, we'll be happy to take it now. Otherwise, we will jump into the panel session with John and Sam.
Samuel here. I have a question. I had the honor to introduce you, Dr. Rowland. I thank you for your presentation, very insightful. And you know, even as I introduced you, I was impressed with what I was saying. But I think you play a very important role in the PropTech space, and particularly in Nigeria. Even though, you know, obviously there is a Pan-African impact you're having. This is a great platform to prove that. And congratulations on that special mention from the Vice President's office. I guess before we dive into our panel, I would love to understand, because I know that some of the challenges that, you know, PropTech founders like ourselves are having, and this will be one of my answers to that question. I think exclusive partnerships, you know, with people in the PropTech space, whether it's through government or developers that could benefit from the value that some of our solutions are bringing, are one of those key answers that we have to help promote, right? How do we increase the network between developers and people creating solutions through PropTech, and in parallel, government and their own housing and finance initiatives and PropTech founders. We had a very interesting seminar that the AUHF hosted in Namibia last year, where we brought different stakeholders, both from the private sector and the public sector. And it was interesting to see, I think from my side, the reactions in the room when the private sector presented in that seminar, and, you know, the access to data that the private sector has that the public sector doesn't have, and the access to data and the efforts on the public sector side that are not being complemented with those in the private sector. So I guess to wrap up my question from the Nigeria perspective, just to give a little bit of context on that, what have you seen, or what type of initiatives have brought public and private sector together? I think it's a key question that I have for myself. In Namibia, in Southern Africa, their, you know, government in their major urban cities where they're overwhelmed with housing demand have very strong housing initiatives, and, you know, they're doing obviously their best to allocate land, to service land, and to build affordable housing. they're struggling, right? Their initiatives are not very effective. And well, I hustle and just to kind of merge this gap and bring my ideas to their efforts. And it's been a complicated journey. So yeah, any insight or
I mean, Sam, great. It's the, how would I put it? Is the problem that needs solving that we continue to push. I'll give you a typical example of how this has worked in Nigeria. So I don't know how many of you know House Africa. You can Google them. They also have a new product now, Sitemap, SYTEMAP, Sitemap, and the startup is House Africa. Now, the reason I brought House Africa was that 3 years ago, when House Africa was working on their product and developing their MVP, they were incubated by a Nigerian mortgage refinancing company, which is clearly a government-sponsored entity they're running with private sector business model. So, for lack of a better word, a quasi-government entity, the Nigerian mortgage refinancing company. Now, what did they do? They provided all of the infrastructure, software, and technology, office space for about 12 months for House Africa. Okay, that alone was a booster for House Africa. And the reason, just to buttress your point in terms of what should be happening, so we need a lot more of that kind of partnerships. And so those are the kind of things we're also doing at Proptech 54, taking traditional players and just trying to introduce the product of the startups to them. I think that's the first place to start. And you know, as adoption happens, as people begin to try the product and use the product, referrals then continues to happen. So really, if you look at the entire elephant and trying to just attack it, you know, head on, it might be difficult. But I think it's to take the bits and pieces, you know, the small bites and impacts that you can do. And that's why I just gave that example for a startup in Nigeria stayed with a player, an entity, a large player for a 12-month period, you know, just helping to test, you know, because NMRC had the capacity to reach a lot of other state governments. Because what they were actually doing, what South Africa was actually doing, is creating a blockchain, helping with titles on the infrastructure of blockchain. And so they needed access to reach state governments. And so NMRC, because they were also working on a mortgage for the state, you know, started to introduce them to a couple of states. You know, I need to check myself what that impact, how much that has impacted. But if I look at House Africa and Sitemap and the recently launched product Sitemap that they've done, I would think that that's played a role. So in terms of working together, that's the part that I think we should begin to look at and the part that we should begin to explore. You know, I don't know whether that answers, I just wanted to use that practical example to kind of answer the questions that you have raised. You know, but yes, you need that, you know, when you are with government like that, what we need to do. So for example, I'll give you another example. When remember I talked about the Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Authority, which is LASRERA. When LASRERA was starting up, you know, we worked with Landlords Technology, which was part of, which is a startup that I'm also part of, helped in designing and working with the platform in setting up the LASRERA platform for Lagos State. So what had happened, this is Lagos State recognizing a private startup and working with that startup to build that platform that enables them to regulate the real estate market. So that a lot of that partnership it's hard work. I'm not saying it's easy, you know, it's hard work, serious hard work, you know, but we need to continue to make those introductions, get into those inroads, and then we can then start to scale. But yes, you are right, is the way to go. But in terms of exclusivity, I don't think any PropTech startup should be looking at exclusivity. I don't think your goal when you haven't gone viral, so to speak, when people don't know you yet, is to be looking at that exclusivity. I think what you want to do is even let them get to use the product, even if it's for free, right? I think that's the way startup founders should start thinking. I don't think it's about, yes, revenue is good to generate revenue,
But I think that for most part of it, in terms of getting to the product market fit and just making sure that your MVP is tight, that's the process. That's what I would advise, and because I've seen it work, with many startups that we've had interest in.
Sorry, Dr.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll take the lead. There's a few questions in the chat box, so I'll read them out loud, and then I'll let you jump in between. So the first question is from Mao Mukuria. When it comes to housing, the main issue is affordability. Most urban areas cost too much. Average acre in Nairobi is approximately $200,000. A 20 square meter studio is $20,000 in urban areas. Should we focus on affordable rentals instead?
Okay, so for that question, right? I think, like I said before, we need to be, and this is where Proptech founders need to begin to look at the narrative and look at that inflection point, right? Why do we want to dwell on home ownership, right? So I totally agree with you. Focus on affordable rentals. And don't just focus on affordable rental in such a way that you are operating the traditional business model. Look at how you can take the concept of the sharing and collaborative economy. So beyond just having affordable rentals, do you think that you can profile two people who would love to stay with each other, in an apartment and share the cost? And like I said, the consumer demographics are changing, the consumer behavior is changing. So these are areas where Proptech can really have impact. So to answer your question, yes, I have always been a proponent to say that, look, I don't think home ownership is the solution to affordable housing, right? I mean, you need to listen clearly, or you need to take some time pause and just listen to what I'm saying. Home ownership is not the only solution. Let me not say it's not the solution. It's not the only solution. So affordable housing, I don't need to own that asset. I need to be able to use that asset without hindrance. That's all I need if I cannot afford to own the asset. But what I'm even saying is that consumer behaviors that we have seen right now are not even, a lot of the young millennials are not even interested in owning the assets. So you are right, in terms of if we can focus on affordable housing, because with affordable housing with affordable rentals in urban areas, you are even helping fill up a lot of the vacant properties. And that in itself is circular economy. Because these are assets that are not being used, or they've gotten that are dead. And again, all of this impacts on the sustainable development goals, where we're talking about responsible consumption and responsible production. So if I left a 3-bedroom apartment or a 12 units of a 3-bedroom apartment in highbrow Nairobi, that nobody can use and it's been there for 5 years, what's that? That's irresponsible production. And so if I can bring in rentals on a monthly basis using the concept of collaborative economy and sharing economy, where people can live together in that asset, what am I fulfilling? I'm fulfilling 2 or 3 of the SDG goals already. And that is circular economy in itself. So really, my point is yes to your question, to say that we should, as Proptech startup, because the thing is, I'm not expecting any founder to go and get involved in constructing development or having money to be. No, you are not. Your goal is to find a solution around the assets that are underutilized. All right, and see how you can improve on the usage and the customer experience for that product.
Most definitely. I think the demand pool is very segmented, and we need a hybrid model to create solutions for the different players. We have a question here from Edward Yao. He says, hi, I'm Edward from the African Circular Economy Network. I'm glad to attend this virtual masterclass. My question is, to know how real estate sector in Africa is integrating circular economy principles and what are some opportunities and challenges that arise from this integration.
Okay, great. So Edward, I just talked about how real estate and circular economy can work. When I was talking about, circular economy is basically talking about zero wastages, getting to the last point of one production, process and being able to use the waste or the last end of that production process and turn it into something else. And that's basically what I'm saying about circular economy when I made the examples of apartments living 3-4 years and they are not being used. Another thing that we have also seen, and you can also look this up. We've seen situations where offices during the days turn into restaurants at night where they're not being used. I've forgotten the name of this startup, who's brought about that development, who's doing it, but I'm sure if you Google it, you will find it. So they have these apartments that they turn around. Okay, once the office shut down at 5 p.m., by 7 p.m., that place is already turned into a restaurant. What's happening is to say that the period for which that asset is not being used during the day, right? They are turning it to a restaurant that works up till about 2 a.m. And between 2 to 8 a.m. in the morning, that place is turned back into an office space. I just can't remember that startup, but I read it and it's something that you can Google. So that's circular economy in itself. Because when you talk about the asset class that we are dealing with, in circular economy is not only bringing down the building and turning it into something else, or when you demolish a building, the debris of that building, you can, no. I think we need to start to look at, because the asset class we're dealing with is not like plastics. So if I was talking about circular economy, about recycling, about wastage, so I can easily tell you, you can go to the sea, take a lot of plastics that are being deposited there, use it for, which is also circular economy. There are alternative building technologies where we've seen people using plastic materials for building materials that they've used. That's one part of circular economy that I've seen happening. But I'm saying beyond just producing that asset, that for existing asset, you can also use that concept of circular economy, just as I've explained. And so, Eduardo, I think you're looking at what you're doing with the circular economy network. I think we need to have a lot more interaction in terms of how we can share examples with you on how circular economy is working within the real estate asset class.
Okay, very good. We have a question from Emmanuel Canduanao. Hi, Dr. Roland, thanks for the presentation. My question is, how can one push for Proptech awareness, like in lines of bringing stakeholders and startups? I'm a member of the Proptech Uganda.
Just keep talking, right? Emmanuel, just keep talking. It's a good thing that you're already a member of Proptech Uganda. Just keep engaging, organize meetup, right? Have fireside chats, just keep talking, just keep engaging, look for how, I think what is also important to do within an ecosystem is to, even if it's just an avenue to just interact and share ideas. A WhatsApp group can even suffice, just to share interaction, just to engage, just to talk about. I think that's the way to go, because in all of that engagement, you will find people who are passionate and who are willing to serve within that Proptech Uganda ecosystem. So yes, in terms of looking at bringing stakeholders and startups together, I think that's the thing. Another good thing, now I'll tell you what's working for us in the local market in Nigeria, right? And you can use this again to profile anybody who would have interest. So for example, I've done close to about 22 years of real estate advisory work in Nigeria. So it's easy for me to knock the door of any real estate developer in this country. And, the ones that I don't know, I'll know somebody who knows them. All right? So what am I saying? You guys can identify somebody within the ecosystem in Uganda who spends that number of time and have credibility and who can be a go-to person. And so on the basis of that, you can use, because really, I mean, I don't know how many startups you just want to walk into the office of some big real estate developer and they listen to them. There might be a few who are lucky to do that, but it's all about relationships and the network. So a practical thing that you can do outside of all of the meetups and engagement that I've talked about is to identify someone in Uganda who is interested in real estate technology or PropTech, and then bring him into the fold, and then he can then be sort of the access, to talking to all of the stakeholders, whether it's private sector or whether it's government. I hope that helps.
Most definitely. I think this one is more of a statement. Heather Dodd, Africa has the youngest population, eager to take up the challenges of the future. They expect and deserve more than they have received.
True.
Okay, very good. Michael Kanyu, what's the uptake on the supply side? For example, context in Africa, Kenya, minimal. Curious about Nigeria and Southern Africa.
Well, I think in terms of context, the biggest we have heard, I think it's the biggest things that we have heard is coming from Kenya. And if you say Kenya minimal, I would say Kenya is ahead of the curve because I know that there's a lot of 3D. I think Lafarge is doing something on 3D printing in Kenya. They've also shown interest in doing, I think they have a model house in Kenya. I'm talking about Lafarge, the cement company. I also think that Lafarge is also thinking of having same 3D printing prototype in Lagos, but I'm not sure that they've come to that point. But in terms of context, the way I like to look at this is that if you look at PropTech globally, if countries like the US, and countries like maybe Asia countries and the US, maybe the entire North America and Europe, if they PropTech 7.0, Africa probably will be around PropTech 2.0. And so when you start to talk about context, I think that it's something that will happen, but I think that we're still we're not there yet. I think I am a proponent of believing of starting from what we can achieve and scale. So for context, there are a lot of issues around context. So for example, in Africa alone, the infrastructure for energy, for power will affect context, right? But that's not to say that context cannot happen. So again, I'm saying that for context, what we've seen is around 3D printing, which also haven't scaled up yet. But we've seen big corporations like Lafarge, thinking about 3D, which is a good thing. And they've even gone as far as doing prototype. But the other form of construction technology that I think will come into Africa as the other components of PropTech start to happen. That's my view, in terms of how these things should pace out.
Yeah, very good. I think I can add that some of them are regulatory restrictions, lenders might not want to give or are not open to giving out a mortgage on a construction technology that they're not familiar with, or that cannot guarantee a 20-year mortgage on a property, especially with the high rates of.
Yeah, very true. I agree with you. And I think Tandy will just also shared a link on 3D printing by one of the members of AUHF 14.3. So I think we should also just look that up in terms of understanding what 3D, what context is also doing in terms of 3D,
Yep. We have a question from Godwin. Thanks for your presentation. For startups that have been largely successful, do you see anything that significantly contributed to that success?
Say that again. I didn't get that.
For startups that have been largely successful, do you see anything that significantly contributed to that success?
So I'll tell you, you say startups, that's kind of generic, but I'll limit it to PropTech startups. Okay. For those that have been successful, I think that they've found a real problem to solve. That doesn't mean that you can have a real problem to solve and still not have taken off yet. I can tell you that for free. Okay, but in terms of looking at Proptech startups that have succeeded, I think one thing that has happened is they are solving a real problem. And then secondly, the founders have spent more time, and this is very critical. They have spent more time trying to get a use of the product, which is adoption, rather than going out chasing VCs and trying to get money. Because a lot of people think that once I have the product, it's okay, and then let me start to look for VCs who can know. You need to prove that that is the case, that there is a problem that needs solving, you have solved it, and people are beginning to use it. You don't have to have a balance sheet where you are having huge profits. No, nobody is interested in your profits right now. People are just interested in, can this solve my problem? Can I use this product? What's my experience in using this product? So those are the two things that I will tell you, that for the startups, that's what it's a lot of hard work. To just bring it to 2 points may not be fair. But I think, again, I'll reiterate, first of all, the product market fit. And that's establishing that there is a problem that you're solving, okay? And your product has gone ahead to solve that problem. Having solved that problem and have one use case for one person, you need to replicate that use case so that you have a lot of cases and you can actually show to people that people are using this product. And then once that happens, and you start to generate revenue, mind you, I'm not talking about profits, I'm just talking about generating revenue. Once you start to generate revenue, then you can find some VCs, money, who will come in. I mean, there are a lot of conversations that we can have around VCs. I think that this is not just the class. We'll probably schedule something to talk about VCs and why you shouldn't take VC money when you're at a certain stage of your Proptech startup. But like I said, that's the conversation for another day.
Then I think last question, Sivu Bikicha, as a financier in affordable housing, we finance small-scale developments for rental purposes. Nigeria is a particularly interesting market for us with a 22 million affordable housing deficit. Is the market receptive to alternative finance solutions, which can finance developments for rental purposes?
Okay, great. I think in terms of alternative finance solutions, it would be nice to know what you're talking about. If you're talking about, an example would be crowdfunding. Okay. I think the challenge is, again, because we are dealing with a real estate asset class, you want to make sure that your alternative finance options does not take out the people that you are trying to really provide financing for. If somebody is the
I think you muted yourself. Dr. Roland? I think you're on mute.
Something that the market can absorb, and something that is not an interest rate that is high, that the market cannot take anymore. I hope that helps. Hello?
Yeah, I think you were on mute for a portion of your answer. Maybe.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe summarize and just re-answer the question.
Okay, I think again, in terms of alternative financing, yes, the market will be receptive, but I'm just saying that you have to be, because you haven't said what type of alternative financing, I'm saying that it could be crowdfunding, it could be REITs, it could be collective investment scheme, but you just want to make sure that these are not the kind of financing that are above market rates. For example, housing microfinance is expensive. Even microfinance institutions financing alternative rental finance or affordable housing finance are also expensive, but you just want to make sure that they are not above market rates. But if you are talking about crowdfunding or like REITs, there are regulations, for example, in Nigeria that allows you for doing REITs. In fact, recently there's a crowdfunding regulation that just happened in the country. I think it was in 2021 or so. And so I think about two startups have gotten the license from the government. I also happen to be involved in one of the startups, which is Prop Crowdy. So there are alternative finance. You just need to be careful in terms of what the financing terms and conditions are. Because again, like I said, we're already dealing with the long-term assets. Okay.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you for all your answers. I think there's no more questions. People had some comments back to you, to some of your responses. But perhaps we can move on to the second part of the
okay,
event.
great. Because of time, I think we should quickly move into the second part of the presentation, which is basically talking about some of the things that we've talked about. But I just want to, it will be nice to hear from the two founders with me on this masterclass today. I'm talking about John Oame, who is founder for Construct, and Sam, who has been helping with this masterclass since we started. So Sam and John, I hope you guys are ready to share your experiences. I think my very first question would be in the nutshell, and I'm going to start with you, John. In the nutshell, what do you think that, if there was one thing that would help adoption for PropTech startup, what do you think that thing would be?
Thank you so much, Roland. And I feel like you already did justice to our panel, ahead of time. That was very, very insightful for me as well.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
I think the one thing that I think is most critical is the thing that we're doing right now. A lot of people underestimate the power of advocacy. Countries have been built on proper advocacy, proper communications, and being able to make a vision clear. And I think that's what we're sort of trying to do here. I think that's the one big thing. Until people can see the value in something, they will just not adopt it. There are a lot of industries that are not struggling with adoption because the value proposition is clear. And I think us being able to clearly articulate our value proposition as PropTech companies will be very key. One thing I always like to underscore is that industries are made of people. So when we say real estate industry, we're actually talking about people, right? And so if we want to study or understand the behavior of the industry, it's important that we study and understand the behavior of the people in the industry. And I think the important thing is that a lot of the people in the industry, first of all, have had extensive years of experience in technology, PropTech, FinTech, any technology at all is typically demographed with a much younger generation. And so the first thing is there's that question as to, do you have enough experience to even be talking to me about real estate finance? I've done it for 30 years. And these are, not common to PropTech. Other industries like the photo industry, once upon a time, there was Polaroid, who is now, sort of in extinction because they were sort of used to a way of doing things and didn't adopt quickly. The telecoms industry saw that with Nokia, with BlackBerry, and many cases that we can talk about. So the truth is, it's people that are in the real estate industry. We need to continue to engage with them. We need to continue to show them, the value proposition. And over time, I think adoption would increase. The other thing is that, like we've sort of pointed out in all our discourse, that collaboration. I always say to my young founders, my friends, my peers, my colleagues, that there's no shelf where they buy experience. Experience can be bought, right? And so taking the experience of the industry players who have been in the industry for 30 years, for 40 years, and bringing it into the same room with technological founders who have this big vision of how they can make the industry more efficient, more effective through technology will be very, very important. And so that collaboration that we've talked about is key. And one of the ways we can do it is by creating small groups for adoption. We talk about, setting up a group for adoption as if it's a nice to have. No, the truth is every product that we have today, be it cars, be it planes, be it phones, they never started out perfect. And so the first testing phase is a key and a natural phase to the development of any product. It's not about PropTech. So getting ourselves into a room to sort of adopt PropTech in small phases, use it, hit product market fit by making sure it's efficient, checking for blind spots, sort of concluding on some of the assumptions we've made is a critical phase that must be gone through. A lot of startups like ours have had to find our way around it. But if through adoption, we can start bringing, for example, affordable housing organizations beside a company like LiveVend that is helping, with construction procurement, and we can start incubating, we can start fine-tuning. The platforms won't be perfect from day one, but over a period, we can get them to now be, up to scratch. And this helps the ecosystem entirely. The sellers are helped, the buyers are helped, everybody is helped in a sense. So I think the biggest thing is this advocacy that we're doing, where we're putting us in the face of the decision makers and getting them to the point where they can take action. Thank you, Roland.
Thank you very much, John. And I think you're spot on in terms of what should happen, really. And I'm happy that, everybody on the call, like you said, we touched on some of these things, but I think the practical experience in what you guys have done becomes very, very important and critical. So Sam, let me ask you the same thing along those lines, because I mean, you had a great pitch, in DC and all of that. I mean, and you are in a terrain where you have traditional people, so from your experience, you want to tell us that one thing that has helped, in moving you forward along this path?
Certainly. So I definitely agree with John. I think collaboration and bringing people together in the same room and trying to understand what the different initiatives are. I think one of them is something that you touched on, Roland, is education and awareness, launching campaigns, doing webinars of this sort, bringing people together and, educating them on what we're doing in the industry. I think one issue or a challenge actually that we're having, and when I say we, I mean everybody in the PropTech industry, it's something relatively new. We're talking on adoption because this is a challenge, and that's the access to financing. How do we scale our product? Obviously, we have found a niche, we have found a solution for a challenge that we have found. In some of these cases, it comes from a background of experiences, and in some of these cases, it comes from somebody who just found the challenge and they're trying to solve it. So, at Fundroof, we are built from a construction background. We've been building affordable housing across Southern Africa for about 8 years. And that's what kind of exposed us to the different challenges in the sector. I think one important inspiration that brought Fundroof to life is understanding as a developer that there is a massive catch-22 that hinders on development in the development of housing and the access to financing. And that's that you cannot just solve a problem for a developer, you cannot just solve a problem for a home buyer. There's a lack of access to land. There are municipalities and local in the local context that are not so easily giving the limited amount of land and putting it out there for developers because they don't trust the process, because maybe the land is not serviced, because the developer doesn't have access to financing, because the home buyers don't have access to end user finance. So it's about understanding also, like, how are we creating a solution that will not just stop at a certain point, but how do we address the different challenges in that catch-22 context that will allow us to execute and distribute our products. So at Fundroof, we're doing that. We've created a multi-user portal that allows developers to, number one, upload their stock, gain access to the effective demand. So we are pre-approving home buyers. And for the home buyer, we are creating a platform that they can kind of democratize rates. They can get access to all the different developers. They can upload all the documents pertinent to their mortgage application and pre-approval. And by so doing, they're democratizing their journey to home ownership, to end user finance, because they can simultaneously submit their application to multiple banks. And in that sense, creating like a competitive landscape for lenders to now be more interested and how they're expanding their footprint and how they're creating innovative products for that market that is now so tangible. And then I think lastly, one important last piece is capacity building, skills development. You know, we are experienced in development. We're experienced in the housing industry. We've created our Proptech solution. Now, how do we distribute our solution, right? So I think in the context of Fundroof, we've created this platform that is for home buyers. Obviously, there's a hardware, there's a technology component that, you know, from our side, we understand that limits the access to our platform. And we have to work with real estate agents that are out in the field. Real estate agents in the housing industry are some of the hardest working individuals. They're chasing a police officer, they're going to his home, they're talking to his wife, they're going to his office, they're trying to get his documents. If the police officer is not getting access to end user finance, the real estate agent cannot make his commission from the sale of the house. So, you know, these people are hustling. So we're trying to train them. We're trying to do capacity building training sessions on how they can use our platform and empower their go-to-market strategy with our platform. We've created dashboards for lenders that give them a world of insights and the inflow of leads that come in through our platform. And we're helping lenders understand what the market looks like. We're aggregating data so that, you know, maybe a developer is not interested in building a house for $8,000 US, but when you're able to aggregate data and minimizing costs, because that's one of the reasons that lenders are not, you know, having extensive footprints in the market. It doesn't make sense for a lender to go give out a loan in this small town in the north of the country because their operational costs are just too high to originate that loan. But when you have market aggregators and you have all the data that comes from the Proptech side to empower all the different people, we're not just empowering ourselves, we're also empowering them to create innovative products, innovative mortgages, because you've aggregated and you're creating these economies of scale so that now it makes sense for them to access these markets.
Now, another thing that I also looking at in terms of adoption, right, is there, if we're looking at the Proptech space, do you guys think that there's one particular Proptech startup or two or three Proptech startups that you think that this, you know, their model has worked? I know someone asked that kind of, asked a similar question, you know, during the conversation that we had, but it was what I had lined up. And I'm saying that we all play within this space, okay? And because we play in this space, is there 1, 2, 3 Proptech startups? I want to focus on Proptech so that we're not looking at the general startup ecosystem or space, you know? So John, maybe you want to go first and then I'll come back to Sam.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you said that is very valuable during your presentation is that sort of the gestation period for real estate projects is quite long. So it beckons on us to sort of give some time, you know, to see or to say whether, you know, a Proptech solution is successful or not. But one thing I would say is that to the extent that, you know, we raised the highest form of funding, amount of funding in the last year, it shows that there's traction. I think it will take us another year or two to really, you know, be able to say who the winners are, because a lot of the Proptech startups are still, you know, at best in seed stage, which is where they now have a working MVP and they're sort of trying to, you know, go a bit wide. I think importantly, it's something to watch, but I think it might be premature to claim anybody, you know, is winning yet. We've made significant traction over the last couple of months, done close to $1 million in GMV, which is interesting. But is that a win yet? I won't say that. I think it's sort of still a process. We're all still sort of gestating through that initial early days. And I think the support that we sort of rally around to give each other will be key to determining, you know, that win. I may not just yet say, you know, any company is winning or not. Samuel, what do you think?
No, I think I agree with the concept of what you're saying. I think that, you know, within the PropTech industry, we're very early on. You know, as one myself, I can tell you that, you know, we've kind of created this MVP. We've proved the concept works, and even so, as time goes by, we continue to find how the market is segmented in so many different ways that we have to continue to build upon what we've already built in order to cater for the wide market that we found. You know, you mentioned Split. I know the founder of Split. I know that he's been doing a great job. He's found a niche market within, well, I guess niche and Nigeria don't go in the same sentence because it's such a big place. But I'm sure he's building upon. I like that. I'm sure he's building upon what he's already built and finding different issues and challenges along the way. There's a company that inspired me a lot that just raised some money, and they're also very early on. But I think that this is also one of the challenges that the African continent in its different contexts has to solve, and it's how to build credit. So, you know, at Fundroof, we're trying to, as we aggregate the demand of home buyers, we're trying to figure out innovative ways to help them build credit. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're allowing home buyers to kind of, well, in the small context of those that fit this particular niche, leverage the ownership, the equity on the land that they have to put that equity forward to borrow enough money to maybe build their foundations. And then once they build their foundations, kind of aggregate the value of the foundations on the future value of the house they're trying to build, and aggregate that equity and to borrow more money and so forth. So it's kind of like a progressive leverage on the progressive building that they continue to have. And as we start piloting those projects, like how do we incentivize more and more of the lenders that we're working with to participate in lending out to those sort of people? I mentioned Boomspay. Boomspay is a startup in the United States. They just raised some seed capital, and they're going to the market to help kind of digitize. I think the rental space is very segmented, is very informal in the way that people pay. In the US, you have different payment platforms like Venmo. So some tenant might pay his landlord through Venmo. And if you're able to kind of digitize and register a home where the person is paying rent and kind of formalize that process, Roland, you mentioned that, you know, it's a hybrid solution, right? Like we're not all solving for home ownership. There has to be rental in the space. Not everybody can afford to buy. So, you know, as those people are renting, how can they build up their score to progressively get to their home ownership dreams?
I mean, very, very, very correct, Sam, in terms of the alternative, whether you're renting and then how do they build up that scores? Because really, you also get to a point that landlords want to give properties to people who can afford it and who have good scores in terms of that. I think we'll go one more question because I think we're just 2 minutes to the mark. I don't know, except you guys give otherwise. But in terms of back to adoption, and again, I think that we can take questions. You can leave questions around this adoption. Tandiwe, if you just want to open the chat, if you have any questions around adoption and what's happening. And also to your point, John, in terms of that, it might be too early. And I think it's also a good perspective because you want to make sure that people are not running off thinking we have won so early, you know. But what I wanted to do was just see if there are any examples that one can follow within the region or within the continent. I mean, very true that, you know, one startup can be doing very well today and then tomorrow issues around corporate governance will hit and you are wondering, was this really a successful business model? And is this something that we can go along? You know, again, that's something that we haven't spoken to enough, but I think corporate governance is also a major issue. You know, we see all of that happen to WeWork, you know, good thing that they survived and they're still on. And not just WeWork. I mean, we've had some stories within the continent where corporate governance have just nosedived a startup who everyone was doing well and all of that. But we're not talking about corporate governance today. We're talking about adoption. So let's leave corporate governance for a bit. So in the product market fit stage, right? And I wanted to avoid money issues, but it looks like you can't avoid money. You know what I mean? You can't avoid money. So in that phase, right, John and Sam, where should PropTech startups be looking for money? At what point should they begin to say, okay, now, I'm not talking about family and friends. I'm not talking about angels, you know, because that's family and friends are family and friends. They can stick with you till, you know, but at what stage of this adoption process should PropTech startups be looking at money, you know, from VCs, you know, pre-seed and all of that, based on your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Roland. I think the basic rule of thumb, right, with fundraising is that you want to look for money before you need it, right? You don't want to wait till you need money before you start looking for it. So basically, you start looking for money before you need it. That said, that's where the complexity of being a founder comes in, because you need to be able to wear multiple hats and be able to share your time into, you know, wise percentages. How much time you want to sort of invest in speaking to investors, building relationships with them, talking to them, sort of building in the open with them so that they can see your progress, right? Investors are also accountable for the money that they, or the funds that they have. They're not looking to invest in PropTech just because it's a charity, it's not a charity, right? So you want to begin to prove yourself as a worthy vehicle for these investments to come in by taking them along on your journey. However, I think at this early stage, the other thing that is more important is being able to hit that product market fit, being able to get adoption, you know, being able to clarify, you know, that vision that you've seen. You know, there's this big, beautiful vision about how construction, for example, becomes very digital. Somebody can come in and type ChatGPT, you know, and, you know, he gets drawings, he gets models, you know, he gets costing, and he gets people to work with. It's beautiful, right? But there's a lot of very tough and difficult practical steps that need to be built. It's almost like building blocks, right? So I think in terms of fundraising at the early stages, it's somewhere between 80-20. A founder should, you know, sort of reserve about 20% or 30% of his timeshare to fundraising at the beginning, while he puts about 70 to 80% on actually hitting product market fit, building the product. Because the truth is, at the point where, you know, he hits product market fit and there's adoption, then it's easier, you know, to unlock investment. There's funds, you know, out there looking for viable companies to invest in. The question is, are you a viable company? Have you proven that? Are there hypotheses that you have proven that will make you interesting, you know, to investors? So I think 80% of your time, 70-80% of your time is decent, you know, for a founder to sort of commit to building his product, and then somewhere between 20 and 30 for fundraising at the early stages. Samuel, maybe you can share your thoughts as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's been our journey, John. I by the way, look forward to connecting with you privately after this session, and maybe we can share ideas and notes. But yeah, I think you definitely have to reach the MVP. You have to make sure you're you know, product market fit before you can start raising money. I think there is an important difference between this, like, you know, seed stage, pre-seed and seed stage, and you know, in that there are you know, program accelerators that might want to give you more equity and might have to, like, time requirements in the preparation and resources that they're giving you. So you have to know where you are as a founder. You know, if you've already built your product and you're in the market, you obviously don't have 2 months to go, you know, to one of these accelerator programs and go kind of learn how to create your product. So it's important to know where you are and what stage you are. And then, you know, join the different platforms. Definitely get a lot of exposure. You know, last week we were at the World Bank Global Housing Conference. I think the most valuable thing that I got out of that, besides this award, was the network of people doing different things, the feedback on you know, not just the feedback on how we shared our ideas, what they think of it, what the difference is between my market and their market, how I'm able to envision how we scale into new markets based on what they're telling me. So definitely all of these platforms like the AUHF and CAF that are sponsoring this event are great resources to connect with other players. I'd like to promote once again, we'll be hosting through the AUHF, the African Union for Housing Finance will host its annual conference this year in Namibia, and that will be one more incredible platform to connect with different people from across the continent.
Okay, great. I think Sam, you've come to the right place to kind of let's wrapping this up. You're already talking about the Namibia event, which I think everyone should come on. And then I think our contacts are open. You can always get in touch with CAF, with AUHF, Tandy, David, John, and Sam. You know, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask further, and it's fine to have private meetings. You can always LinkedIn, emails are fine, and we can schedule to continue this conversation. And like everyone has said, I think this engagement should really continue. Thank you very much, John, for leaving your email on the chat box. And so I'll hand over to our chair of membership to do the wrap up. And I think my job is done in the masterclass, right? Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Dr. Roland. It was a great presentation, very insightful. Thanks, John, for joining us.
Thank you, Sam.
All the participants that made the time. I see that we had a constant participation. We had almost nobody drop out of the session, so we can give ourselves a hand of applause for keeping everybody engaged and keeping it very insightful. So thanks everybody for joining, and we hope to see you at the next one.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you, Sam. Speak soon.
Yeah, bye, John. Thanks for your time, David.
Thank you, Roland. Always. Thank you. Always. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.